Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Today's daf is Daf Mem Beis and Zbachim is reading for and Kol Beis Yisrael and Son about Sarva Shivya. Now, yesterday's Gemara, my mouth and Beis had the discussion. If we go back even to the Mishnah, back on what was it, Lamed Vavam and Beis, you remember Karbonis that are brought on the outer Mizbeach, according to Beis Hillel, one zrika is enough. If you did one zrika, that's good enough, right? Instead of all four, if you did one, that's good enough. Therefore, if you finished, you did everything properly, Shchita, Kabbalah, Zrika, and you did one Zrika, and then you messed up the last three, it doesn't count because you're done already. On the other hand, if you messed up that first Zrika and you said made it piggle by saying you're going to eat something, you're being Zorik the Dam on the condition that something will be consumed, either meat will be consumed by a human being, or the Dam or the Emur will be consumed by the Mizbeach, Chutz Lizman, that makes it into piggle. And the other three aren't going to help, aren't going to make any difference because you're done. That's on the outer Mizbeach. But the Korbanos are brought on the inner Mizbeach, like the Parm Nisrafim, Sirim Nisrafim, the Parm Levashil Tzibor, Par Kohen Mashiach, the Korbanos, the Saravadas Kachavim, or the Korbanos of Yom Kippur. There you need all the Zrikas. All are necessary. As we saw, when it comes to the Par Kohen Mashiach, Parm Levashil Tzibor, there's 11 Zrikas, right? 4 on the inner Mizbeach, we're talking about in the Heichal, and then there are 7 that's sprinkling towards the Parochas. Okay, so they're all are necessary. All are necessary. And if you only had a machshava pigel on, instead of on all 11, let's say if it's 11 zrikas, you had a machshava pigel on one of them, that doesn't make it pigel. Why? Because ein mefagim mechatzi mater. Back on Vav and Beis, the Mishnah said that when it comes to the Mizbeach Kol Nitnin, I'm reading the end of the Mishnah on Lamed Vav and Beis. Kol Nitnin Mizbeach HaPnimi, anything brought on the inner Mizbeach, that would be, it's also called Mizbeach HaKtoras or Mizbeach HaZov. Shim Chisar Achad Matanas Gilo Keeper. If you didn't do all of them, it's like you didn't get a kapara. It's not like Karbanos in the outer Mizbeach. If you did all of them properly and one improperly, even though we saw yesterday's Gemara said that Tiknin can be all of them with pigel. Tiknin doesn't necessarily proper. It could also mean all of them with pigel but one. In other words, you didn't have a chavar of pigel on all of them. Let's say there were 11 zrikos, 4 or 7 or whatever, 11. If you didn't have makom pigel, it's not real pigel. It's pigel v'ein bokaris. It's not the real pigel because on there you have to have all of them. Because the Mishnah said ein mefagam mechatzi mater. That's what Rashi said. The last words in the Mishnah. The ksaver ein mefagam mechatzi mater. Now yesterday we had another opinion. We had Rav Meir's opinion. He said that, let's say when you're bringing a korban mincha, so there's a kmitza, the fistful of flour that you take what the Kohen takes with his right hand, that can only be a Kohen, not like shchita, which is kosher even by a zar. And then there's also the levona, the frankincense that you also put on the mizbeach together with the komets. And let's say a machshava pigel on the komets and not on levona, or vice versa. Rav Meir says it's pigel, even though both of them together are the matir. Remember, when you by a flour offering, the komets is the equivalent of shchita. You take that, then you put it in the klisharis. That's the kabbalah. Then you take it to the mizbeach. That's the holacha. Then you put it on the mizbeach. That's the equivalent of putting the dam on the mizbeach. And what's matir, the rest of the flour offering to be eaten, the mincha, putting that on the mizbeach. It's like zrika sadam. But there's 2 things there. There's the komets. And most korbanos mincha have also levona, the frankincense that are together with the flour, with a fistful of flour. They're both put on the mizbeach together. They're matter the rest of it to be eaten. So if you let's say only did one of a machshava pigel, that's a chatzi matter. So in yesterday's Gemara we brought down the Mishnah said the Gemara in Mishnah in Menachos that Tanas and pigel becomes comments. Rav Meir says it's still pigel chayv kars. Chum say no, ain't bakars. Achim fagel b'chol mater. You have to have machshava pigel on the entire mater. Now the mater is also shchita. It's also kabbalah. It's also halacha, but it's also zrika. Or in this case, zrika's dam. It's not an animal. It's a korban mincha. So it's burning the mincha. It's burning the komets and the levona on the mizbeach. So you have to have the entire matir. Remember, the entire matir means whatever it takes. There's 4 matim: shchita, kabbalah, zrika. So shchita, you have a pigel on the shchita. Kabbalah, halacha, that's simple. But the zrika or the haktara of the mincha, zrika if it's dam, and the haktara of the mincha, it's got to be a complete, according to the Tanakama, ein mefagim mechatzi mater. So if you only had a kabbalah on part of it, let's say on 2 out of the 11, or 5 out of the 11, or 10 out of the 11 zrikos, according to Chachamim, that's not pigel. because you have to mifagel. You don't have to mifagel in all the avodas. If you had a kavanah of pigul on any one of the avodas or on all of them, as long as there was no other bad kavanah mixed in, you didn't have a kavanah of chutz l'makom or shalol lishmar or something like that, then it's pigul with chorus. But each individual avoda has to be the whole thing. And the Chacham say, if you only had part of it, like you had kavanah pigul on the kometz, not on the levona not on the kometz, it's not pigul with chorus. Rav Meir says it's pigul with chorus. The assumption is that Rav Meir holds mafaglin b'chatzi mater. You don't have to be mafagel on the whole thing. Just like you don't have to be mafagel on all of the avodas, as long as there was no other bad kavanah mixed up, it was only a machshav of pigul, of chutz l'zman, that makes it pigul. You don't have to have kavanah on all of the matir. If it was a partial, let's say you did, while you're doing the shechita, you shechted one siman with a machshav of pigul, one siman without, that's also good. You don't have to be mafagel on the whole matir. Or if the dam, let's say it was a carbon that had 4 zrikas of dam on the inner mizbeach, and you had kavanah on 1 or 2 or 3 and not on the other one, according to Meir, apparently it's pigul because you could be mafagel with a chatzi matter, with a partial matter. That's what the assumption was. Rish Lakish says no. Even Rav Meir holds that ain't mafagel chatzi matter. So what's put over here? Rav Meir says, according to Rish Lakish, wants to say that Rav Meir holds that if you had a kavanah of pigul on the first part, let's say mincha, it counts on the second one too. Because why? Because he said that you call a osal das rishona osa. Whatever you do on das rishona. So that's what Rish Lakish's big chiddush. Today's Gemara is going to ask on Rish Lakish several questions, and the Gemara is going to assume that Rish Lakish is really pretty much discredited, right? His shita is very much refuted. That it's apparently Rav Meir really holds that mafagel mechasi matter. That's what we're dealing with today. So starting with 2 lines from the bottom page on Mem Aleph from the base. Meisvei, when do we say that what? That 1 zrikas dam is good enough, even though by chatos normally you need all 4, right? That's the chachil, you need 4. Beisil says, 2 is good enough, but you need 2. Beisil says 1's good enough. When is that? Only if you're zorek on the outer mizbeach. That would be a regular chatas, right? Regular chatas you do on the outer mizbeach. Avol, the top of membez. If the dam was sprinkled on the inner mizbeach, that would be masrafim sir, avrazara, parvam davashal sibur, etc. Kagon. Arbam v'shalosh yom kippurim. On Yom Kippur, I think I said the other day 42. I misspoke. It's 43. We'll see 43, 47, 48, the different shitas. But there's 43 on Yom Kippur. There's 43 different sprinklings of dam inside the heichal. What are they? So Rashi tells us, top Rashi. Remember, one above, achas v'shtayim, right? 1 above, 7 below. Right on the inside the kosher kodashim, between the badim of the ark, the aron kodesh, right between the staves, you do 8, 1 above and 7 below from the dama par, and also with the dama sa'ir. The Kohen brings 2 bar dama praser, so that's 8 and 8 is 16, right? Then he also does 8 and 8 on towards the paroches. That means not in the kodesh kodashim, in the heichal, where he sprinkles it towards the parochos, which separates between the kodesh and the kodesh kodashim. So you have 8 and 8 is 16, and then another 8 and 8 in the heichal towards the parochos. That's another 16. That gives us a total of 32. We're up to 32 now. Then you have the 4 corners of the mizbeach. That's another 4. That brings us to 36. Right. And then what else do we have? And then you have 7. On the tirosh mizbeach, on the top of the mizbeach apnimi. Remember, not on the corners, but on the top. So you have 36 plus 7 is how much? 43. We'll see later on, is it 43 or is it 47? Well, the 4 on the 4 corners that I said 4 corners, that's if you hold it, you mix the dama par and the dama sar together and you do 4. If you do the par separately and the sar separately, that would be an additional 4, bringing us to 47. As we'll see at the end of the daf. And if you count the dam, the leftover dam, the shiur goes on the outer mizbeach. Takes it outside the heichal, puts it on the southwest corner where the 2 holes are there in the yesod, and push them in there. That would be a total of 48. But inside the heichal, we have either 43 or 47. Let's assume the minimal 43. So now read the Gemara from the top of the page in the Gemara. Go. The 43 sprinklings of Yom Kippur, like we just explained. Or the Param Davar, we say there's 4 on the inner Mizbeach and then 7 towards the Parochas. That's each case, that's 11. Okay. Param Davar Shal Tzibur. Pigel, Bain Barishona, Bain Bishni, Bain Mishlishis, and he gives an example of Yom Kippur. Let's say you had a machshava pigel on the first group. What's the first group, says Rashi? In the matanos that are inside the Kodesh Kodashim, which we says how many? 16, right? 8 with the par, 8 with the sawyer, or Bain Bishnia, or if you didn't have any pigel in the machshava of the inside the Kodesh Kodashim, only on the ones in the Heichal, that's the Shnia, right? On the Parochas, that's another 16. Or Bain B'Shlishis, or you're talking about on the Mizbeach Hazav, which you do there are the 4 corners plus 7 on top. So what do you, if you only had a machshav pigel there, Rav Meir says pigel chayv chorus. Now what does that indicate? Shnia sounds like, says Rashi, he did it on the second one, on the second group without apparently pigel in the first group. He says that's a regular pigel with chorus, which sounds like he says mefaglin b'chatzi matir. Now what do we say? If you say, Rish Lakish says, no, he holds it, ein mefaglin b'chatzi matir, like the Chachamim, except he says you go with the first das. Yeah, but we're talking about 3 different groupings. The inside the Kodesh Kodashim, inside the Heichal, and then on the Mizbech, 3 different groupings. It's mashma here. If you had a pigel machshava either on the first one or on the second one mashma without the first one. I had no machshava pigel on the ones inside this Kodesh Kodashim, only on the ones towards the Parochas. Well, that's a chatzi matir. That's not the whole thing. It's not das Rishona, which we're assuming right now. Rameir says pigel ham karas, em karas achi faga b'chol matir. Racham say it's not chorus until you had a machshava on all 43. All 43. Tani means what you see here, pigel ben misham ben mishim ben shlishis, upolig, and you see Rav Meir argues there too. So how could Rish Lakish say that Rav Meir agrees a mefaglim chatzi matir, that you can't be mefaglim unless you have the machshava the whole thing, except in the case in the Mishnah that from Menachos we had a machshava, a pigel on the komets, on the fistful, and not on the levona, or a levona, not on the fistful. Oh, there he's going with the first das. Even if you had a machshava of pigel on the komets, but not on the levona, we assume the levona he had the same intention as on the first one. Here we're talking about each one separately, 1, 2, and 3, and he argues there. I'll tell you why. Go and shepigel b'shchita dechad matiru. You know what the pigel was over here? He's in the it's a real strange case. Where after he did when you talk about the second one, what's the second one? Not the lefnai v'lefnim, not the Kodesh Kodashim and the Heichal. You know what happened? After he finished the 16 zrikas inside the Kodesh Kodashim, he spilt the rest of the blood. How are you going to do the rest of the blood? You got to shecht another animal. So he went outside and he shechted that that's what he means the shnia, when he shechted the second animal to get dam for the Heichal, the chad matiru. So it's one whole matter. In other words, he wasn't mafagel on the zrika of the dam, because he holds ein mafagel, because again, Rish Lakish stands his argument, ein mafagel mechatzi matter, and a partial of the dam isn't good enough. You only did the second group, not the first group. So his answer is no. He was mafagel when he had machshav of shchita. That's the second one. In other words, the blood for the heichal would be coming from a second carbon. Why? Because he spilt the blood of the first carbon after he did the zrikas and the five of him, then he had to do a second one. So when he did the second one, the shchita is a whole matter, right? We said shchita, kabbalah, zrika, each one is a full matter, but by zrika, you got to do all, if it's an inner carbon, you got to do all the zrikas. If you need 4 or 11 or 43 or 47 or 48, you have shav on all of them if you hold ein machbag mechatz matter. He's man the shchita. So yachim aitam rabbanan. So why did the Rabbanan say over here, if you're talking about his shechta, why did the Rabbanan say, Ein b'karas achi fag b'chol mata? That is the whole mata, that's the shchita. Amarav man chacham Rab Lezer, goes like Rab Lezer, who sells a far out shita. Rab Lezer holds, Tana komis, valvan, maktoras, minchasam, all these kinds of flower offerings, where it's the fistful, or the frankincense, or the ktoras, the incense, that they put on Mizbech Minchas Kohen and Mincha V'Kohen, which is totally burnt. Minchas Kohen Mashiach, Minchas Nesachim, all these things are totally libated or burnt on Mizbech. Shehikr Me'achas Men Kazayis Bachutz Chayiv. If a kazayis of it was remarkable on an altar outside the Azara, you're chayiv from Me'achas from Blazer Pota Achiak Ves Kulon. Not enough to do kazayis. Even though he holds that, because if all you had was a kazayis, you could be chayiv for that bachutz. But he says you have to do the whole carbon. no matter what it is. So over here, if you had 2 shchitas or 3 shchitas, whatever the zrikas were, you had a shchita, you have to mifagel on everything. So 1 shchita isn't enough. You have to mifagel on all the shchitas according to him. Rav Blazer sprain shita. Where does Rav Blazer say what? That's talking about, we talk about the meat, the shchita, you have kabbalah shchita there. But by dummies moda, that even partial. That's not Rav Blazer of Shimon Omim, but mimakim shapasek mishamu maschil. There's a debate. Let's say you spilt the blood, like I said before, at the end of the Kadashim, you spilt the blood there. Then now, when you shecht another animal, because now you got to get more blood, you spilt the other blood out. Do you start from the beginning? Do you start from where you left off? Right? You did. So he says you start from where you left off because whatever you did there is good enough. That's considered complete. Rashi says over here in the wide lines, Rav Blazer, about 6-7 lines in the wide lines downtown. Rav Blazer pligi atanakam to Omer Nasa mixes midamshim v'nishbach adam yavi dam acher v'yaskel b'tchila. Tanakam says you got to start all over again. However, gomer also kapara Blazer b'shimon omim that you just pick it up from where you left off. Alma avodi v'pigol l'chayev chutz kamadam slay lami boy b'shchita davi pigol el afilu pigol matana achas also according to Blazer should be pigol el omerava. So again, if there's a strong indication over here that Rav Meir holds mafaglim b'chatzi mater, because otherwise, why would he say that if he had a kabbalah pigel on the first one or the second one or the third one, either one, it's going to. So how do you have the second one? Oh, shchita. Yeah. So if shchita, what's the reason upon it? No. So it goes like Rav Blazer holds all that. That's also strange. But Rav Blazer's motive when it comes to blood, that's good enough. You don't need the whole thing. Ela marava and shepikol b'rishona v'shaslik b'shniya v'chazav b'gol shlishis. You know what happened over here? In this case, when you said the first one or the second one or the third one, the first one being the dam lefnai v'lefnim, second one being the heichel, the third one being on the mizbeach, he had a machshava pigel on the first one, and he had no machshava on the second one. He didn't say anything there. And Rashi says, Rashi in yesterday's Daf said it. We had it back on the base that debate too. Kol machshava shekoshim motzi b'pehu. He said something here. He didn't say anything. So by the first machshava, by this zrikas dam lefnai v'lefnim, he said, "I'm being fago with a machshava. I'm sprinkling it down with a machshava pigel." The second one, the ones on Heichel, he didn't say anything. When it came to Mizbech, he said it again. So what's the point in that? The Mishnah didn't say that. The Mishnah just said, "Bein b'rishon, bein b'shni, bein shlishis." Now you want to say, okay, he had a machshava pigel on the first group, not on the second group, and then on the third group. Now the same. I might think, Isach das rishonu. If you say what? In other words, Rav Shlokish is trying to defend his argument and say what? That Rav Meir only holds that if you didn't have machshava on the second one, you go by the first one. Whatever you do is based on your first machshava. I might say over here, he didn't do it on Das Rishona, because if he didn't on Das Rishona, Mahada Pigul B'Shishis Lamali, if all his other operations, his other procedures are based on his first kavanah, so if by the first group, meaning on the Dam Lefnai Lefnim, he had a machshava pigul, so the second one and the third one, if you hold that he always goes with machshava, with the first that the other procedures follow his first machshava, why did he have to have again? Why do you have to say it again by the third one? If you hold that kala osa al das rishona, that if his first machshava was machshava pigul, and the second one and the third one he was quiet, you can assume that he just followed the same machshava. Why did he have to repeat it again by the third one? He said pigul by the first one. He didn't say pigul by the second one. So there you could say, okay, he did it based on the first machshava. But why did he again say pigul on the third one? That would seem to indicate that on the second one he didn't machshava pigul, because he said it on the first and the third, not the second one. I might think, Isach al das rishonu, mahada pigul b'shishis lomali. Why did he say it again in the third one? Elamai must be that he didn't have to go on for the second one. Kamashmo, no, you say that too. In other words, he was just re-emphasizing it. The first one was pigul. Second one followed the first one, because again, Rish Lakish says, even Rav Meir holds, ein mefagim machasi mater. He had to have a kavanah of pigul on all of them. So why didn't he say it on the second one? Second was following the first one. Yes, but then why would he say it again on the third one if they all follow the first one? Well, okay, he had a break in between, but he still meant to follow. That's a chiddush. Okay. Maskor Vashi, Midi Shasak Tani, does it say that? Look at the word from the top of the page again. Rameir says pigul chayv cars. Didn't say that he was mefagel the first one. By the second one he was quiet, and by the third one he said it. Doesn't make sense. Where do you get the sense? The first and the third he said pigul. The second one he didn't. Does it say that in the Mishnah? No. Elam Ravashi Hachamayaskinan, back in the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of the page, going shepigul b'rishona v'shniya v'shlishis. He had a machshav pigul on all of them. He said it. Now the same. I might think if everything you do is based on the first one, why do you have to say it again? If Rish Lakish is correct, the Rav Meir really holds that ein mefagim b'chasi mater. But the reason why it's pigul there is because what? Because if he had a machshava pigul, the first procedure, he had the same machshava throughout. Why do you have to keep repeating it for? What is he, a ploiter, or what do you have to say it for? If you say that it called osa al das rishona osa, why do you have to repeating it? Why do you have to keep repeating it? Lamali, kamashman, the chiddush know that you still say that even though he kept repeating it. Okay, so he's saying over here, he had a machshava pigul on the first one, and on the second one, and on the third one. Says the Gemara, v'bein bein tani. It said, what were the words in the 6th, 7th line there on Amar Aleph? Or the 4th, 5th line, 4th and 5th line? Pigul bein barishona, whether you're machshava pigul either on the first, or on the second, or on the third. So how can you say he says he had a kavanah pigul on all of them? It doesn't say that. It says if he had a kavanah either on the first, or on the second, or on the third, it's pigul with karas according to Meir. So that's not saying you did it based on the first machshava. Where do you see that? In the Mishnah in Menachos that we quoted on yesterday's daf, pigul b'kometz v'lo b'levonim. B'levonim b'kometz. Okay, so Rav Meir could say, why is it pigul there? According to Rish Lakish, because Rav Meir will say that you had a kavanah on the kometz, you didn't have a kavanah on the levona, or vice versa. Whichever one you did first, you had a kavanah. The second one should follow the first one. But here it said, if you had a kavanah either on the first, or on the second, or on the third, either one. So how can you say it means he had kavanah on all of them? The chiddush is that even though he said it, you still say that kol osa al das rishon osa. Kamashman, you're still doing that. Where do you see that? It said bein bein. Kasha. Gemara says kasha. Top line of the page kasha, which means it's not a Rish Lakish is not totally refuted, but it does seem to indicate that he's wrong. The Rav Meir says mefagim b'chasi mater. Now, if you say the Gemara goes on now. And the Gemara says the reason if you hold that the Rav Meir holds mishum mafagam b'chatzi mater, which is the pashup shot, the Gemara is going to ask a kasha on that too, and it's going to be a difficult one. Omer Mar, Rav Meir Omer pigul b'chayim of kares. Back in the Mishnah in Menachos, right? The ones in Menachos that said that if he had a machshava pigul on the kometz and not on levona, or on the levona and not on the kometz, Rav Meir says you're chayv kares there. Why? Presumably because mafagam b'chatzi mater, not like Rish Lakish. Okay, michdi. Karas l'machayv at shikuv kol matirim, right? You don't get karas until you bought all the matirim properly. Damer makar tzos kasher karas puzzle. What did we say before by pigul? You can't have any bad machshava, but you must complete the process. Let's say a man stam shechted a carbon chatas, a regular chatas that you bring outside on the outer mizbeach, and he had a kavanah pigul. But then he didn't. He says, "Oh, I messed it up already. I'm going home." And he didn't complete it. He didn't do the kabbalah zricha. It's not pigul. It's not pigul until you finish the whole process. So chorus is not there. You don't get chorus. It's not pigul with chorus. Again, for eating it. Don't forget, not the Kohen who is mafagel it. Maybe you'll give him a knas. Maybe you'll have to pay for the carbon. But you only get chorus if you eat that. So Rav Meir says pigul b'chayim chorus. Michdi chorus lo machayiv ashikuv kol matir until you bring all of the things, all the things that permit it to be done, all the things that make it permissible. All the things that permit it, you have to bring everything properly. Just like if you do something properly, did shchit malachas rika properly, when can you eat it after you did this rika? Same thing with the puzzle. Until you bring all the permitting things there. But over here, if you hold it, what? Then Mafagam Meir holds matir. If you're at a machshava on the inner side, on the lefnai v'lefnim, let's say, a pigul, you've ruined it. Sula. So command David, it's as if you didn't sprinkle it. So kimahadar modi, when he continues to sprinkle it in the heichel, the same dam. Remember, he did 16 on the inside. Now he's doing 16 towards the broches. He's sprinkling like water because he's already passled it up. So this is a difficult question because the answer seems obvious, even though it's puzzle, but you got to continue the process, right? But here it's mashma, say the meforshim that he's not even speaking about the par. He says, once you've ruined the dam, let's say, of the par, right? So even though we can understand that, it's continue the process, even though you've ruined it, but the dam of the soyer now is simply like water. This is difficult to understand because the answer seems obvious. So how do you understand that? So Rashi says, take a look at Rashi, just to give us a little bit better of understanding, but it's still difficult. Rashi, 2-3 lines into the narrow lines. Each matana is necessary on karbanos or on the inside. The bishlam faga b'shchita. If you had a pachsham pig on the shchita, avagav the pas, even though you've ruined it now, and then you sprinkled it either b'machshava or b'shtika, either with a machshava pigul, or you didn't say anything. Even the pogel b'avoda acha, since you did pigul on a whole avoda, b'shuv lahotzi machshava pasul, you didn't give any other bad machshava except for that first one of pigul. Afal pishas rikas damo dam pasalu. It's puzzle anyway, because obviously you already mafagel the animal. But even the Rabbi Rachmana, the Torah said, included pigul b'shchita kanamran. It's got to be b'dvar mabim lidei achila kosem b'daber al koch b'ach yom Rachmana. That's why Hashem said the pigul, that it's pigul. V'zrika zu kamisha maratz lepigul. It's like you're finishing it and doing it properly. You made it into proper pigul. B'chen Rabbanu, according to Rabbanu, the bal machshava b'kulas rika. Machshava, the Rabbanu certainly say ein matir b'chatzi matter. You have to in mafagim b'chatzi matter. You certainly need machshava that. So you have a machshava bad from beginning to end. So once you've ruined it, isn't it always ruined? No, that's still pigul. Well, like Reish Lakish, who said this based on Avshishonu, pigul b'chol avoda b'kai gavna amrachman lifgol v'lo mishkachas lebigul b'zrika elavachi. That's the only way to do it. Elamanda v'tam mishum chatzi matter. If you say Rav Meir's reasoning is chatzi mafagim chatzi matter, ain't kan zrika, because you're done. Once you're mafagel this, going over you're mafagel machatzi mater, so you've already ruined it. Keep it lo gomra machshavas pigul, also sofali kishav zil hacha chasi avodah zil hacha. You're not completing it, so it's only like water. Again, the kasha is difficult. You're only doing water, so why is that good? If you hold mafagel machatzi mater, now we're in reverse. Before we ask the kasha from Reish Lakish, and we're going to have another kasha from Reish Lakish. But this Gemara assuming not like Reish Lakish, if you hold the reason Rav Meir said that if you did the komis if you were mafagel on the komis and not on levona or vice versa. It's pigul with chorus because mafagim chatzi mater. So why is it good at all? You never finished it properly because you're mafagim chatzi mater. So as soon as you did the chatzi mater, as soon as you did one dam, it's pigul. You're done. So the rest of it is all puzzle. It's like you're just sprinkling water. Amarava mishkachas lo bar bar. I'll tell you how it would work out. You didn't ruin the first blood so that with the first action so that now you're only doing like water. There's no dam. No. You were mafagel ba'arba parim v'dal serum. In other words, at the end of each avoda, at the end of the 5 of them, at the end of the parochas, at the end of the mizbeach, and then afterwards on the tirush mizbeach on the top, in each one you used a new animal. Let's say you spilled out the blood. You spilled the blood on your way to the next operation. So you had 4 parim parim. So each one had new blood, and therefore it's not considered like water. In other words, if you use the same blood and you ruined it already in the 5 of them, so it's already like water. You're not sprinkling anything anymore. You had 4 different animals. That's one way to learn. Rava says the basic answer of actually recall matira, like we've said, afil tem parech v'sarach. It could be talking about 1 par and 1 sir. You didn't spill anything. Right? The pigula maratza. That's how it works. That's how pigul works. Pigul is a strange thing. You had a bad kavanah and you ruined it, but you must carry out the entire process either properly or with only a machshava pigul. That's how pigul works. It's maratza when you do everything that way. That's how it works. Rashi says 6 lines into the wide lines, or 4. Let's look at 4 lines into the wide lines. Maratza. Ke'echdim chashav b'shchita korla lezrika dam apostle hazeh. Cover material of leratzos, just like if you had a machshava of a pigul and shchita, you must finish everything. You must do the kabbalah lachan zrika, right? The pigulo. Ki chashal b'chatzi zrika when you had a machshava of chatzi zrika, even if you hold mefagim b'chatzi mater, and by the second one you didn't have a bad kavanah, you just were quiet. Kolzman shaloiv machshava acheres, as long as you haven't mixed it up with some other bad machshava, have a ritzla pigul. It's accepted to make it pigul. It's a strange thing. It's not accepted that your carbon is good, but that's how pigul works. Says the Gemara, Abba and Visholish, but why did you say at the beginning that if columns could go on Abba and Yom Kippur? We said there's 43. Remember, 16 inside, 16 outside towards the parochas. That's 32. Plus 4 on the 4 corners of the Mizbeach, that's 36. Plus 7 on the top of the Mizbeach, that's 40. That's 43, right? 36 plus 7 is 43. Says the Gemara, why do you say 43? Didn't we learn another brayso that it's 47? Says when you do the third operation, not the parvasor inside the Kodesh Kodashim, that's 8 and 8. And not the 8 and 8 that you do towards the parochas, which brings you to 32. But when you do on the 4 corners of the inner mizbeach, mizbeach apnim, mizbeach hazav, mizbeach haktoras, you do those 4 corners. Do you do the par and the sar separately, or you do it together? If you mix them together, and then you do 4, so you've only got 4, and 32 plus 4 is 36, right? But if you say you do each the par and the sar separately, so that's 4 plus 4, which is 8. So 32 brings you to how much? Plus 4 plus 4 brings you to 40. And then the 7 on the Tivus Bech brings you to 47. I have a tiny bar mishmon. We learn another Bryce that is 48. We mentioned this before. So Hakamanda Shai Makman, Hakamanda Aim Shai Makman. By an outer Mizbeach, any korban you bring an outer Mizbeach, the Shiram is never Ma'akiv. We see that in Nezom Makoma. We say it every day in Kobaras, right? Pardon? Can't eat it. No, the whole point of pickle is that if you eat it, you chayv karas. The Kohen who is mafagalit, who made it pickle, he's a bad boy. Maybe he'll have to pay for it. No, it's pickle as soon as you completed all the operations properly with only a machshava pickle and no other bad machshava. If it was a bad machshava involved, any other, say you had a machshava of chutz uzman on one operation and chutz l'makom another operation, it's pickle with no chorus. You got to throw it out. You got to burn it. You burn it outside the azar. You burn it. The whole thing is no good. Or if it became pickle in obviously in the azar, you burn it there. There's 4 different places where you burn. We'll talk about that another time. But you burn it. You destroy it. But the kares is only if you eat it. If anybody eats it, once it's known to be pickle and somebody eats it on purpose, he's going to chayav kares. Okay. Now,
who's chayav kares if
the person eats it?
If the mizbeach, when you burn it, the mooring on the mizbeach, pickle, who becomes
it's not.
Who's chayav kares then?
Okay.
No.
Okay. So here's how it works. Pickle means I did shchita kabbalah chazrika, one of those. In the case of karbanos that are bought in Inu Mizbeach, I've got to do all the zrikas according to Rabbanan to make it pickle, right? Meaning what? Meaning I did all the zrikas, all 43 or all 11, what it was, with a machshava that I'm going to eat the meat if it's a carbon that's eaten. The carbon, not the Inu Mizbeach, because the karbanos are bought in the Mizbeach, none of them are eaten, right? The Pagam Mashiach, they're all burnt, totally burnt, not eaten. But let's say it was a regular carbon that's brought outside. So in machshava that I'm going to eat the meat, or that the emurim will be burnt on the mizbeach chutz lizman, eat the meat chutz lizman. Then what happens is that you have to complete the shchit kabbalah chazrika. The emurim is not ma'akiv. At that point, it's pickle. And you could burn the emurim on the mizbeach, or you could not burn them on the mizbeach. But what makes it pickle is that if you eat it. Now, if you eat the meat, you're chayav kares. The one who eats it.
Okay, I understood that.
Okay.
But we said there's 2 kinds of eating. There's the person himself eating, or there's the eating.
Right. No, but that's no. But that's when your machshava. What makes it into pickle is when you did any of the operations with a machshava that it will be eaten outside the zman. Either it will be eaten by a human being if it's meat, or that the zrikas dam will be chutz lizman, or that the emurim will be burnt chutz lizman. That's all your machshava. You haven't done anything. You haven't actually eaten it or been makam chutz lizman. That is machshava. Now the animal's pickle. What's the halach of pickle? That if you eat the meat, you're chayav kares.
So it's
only on the person eating it. Correct.
So the question is, if it's a korban ula,
right?
Then nobody can be ever.
Right. Well, yeah, it can be chayav kares if he eats it. He shouldn't eat it.
It's a carbonol.
It's supposed to be burnt. Let's say he ate it. He made it. He turned it. You understand? It's supposed to be burnt.
Barbecue.
It's supposed to be burnt, but if he eats it, let's say a regular carbon ola that was brought properly, but he made a mistake, and instead of burning the meat and the whole thing, he ate it. Okay, he wasn't supposed to. But that's not kares. He made a mistake. He ate it. Whatever. Did it on purpose, he'd be chayav maybe misbei shemayim or something for eating something he's not supposed to be eaten. But it's not pickle. If he had a machshava pickle on that, then it's pickle. Okay. Says the Gemara, the 2 dots on Amid Beis. Meisvei. Now we're going back to ask another kasha on Rish Lakish. Remember, Rish Lakish said that Rav Meir, even though he says apparently mafagim chatzi matzah, no, he doesn't say mafagim. He holds mafagim chatzi matzah like the Rabbanan. But what? But he just says whatever you do, if you do a second or a third operation, it's based on your first. You'd say machshava. Here we say when do we say what? When do we say? Says Rashi. What's medvar mamurim? Betosef the menachas is bedmar sheminchas nifgula bavoda achas b'kamitza or b'matan kli. Right? U'bilach shein shamel avoda as mater achad. Shein kamitza matan kli levona. In other words, if he had a kavana, let's say when he did the kamitza. Now the levona are the frankincense that you offer on the mizbeach of a korban mincha, but there's no kamitza on that. The kamitza is on the flour. So he says, when do we say what? That the animal is pigul. Remember, kamitza is the equivalent of what? Of shchita. So if you had a kavanah when you did the kamitza, remember you took that fistful of flour and you had a kavanah of pigul there, right? More the kamitza or b'matan kli, that would be kabbalah. Right, a machshava, when I put it into the kli, that fistful, I put it in there, machshava pigul, or behiluch by halacha. But if you came to burn it, meaning to offer it to bring it on the mizbeach, machshava. If he did the kamitza with the machshava pigul, that's a levana b'shtika, and he didn't have a kavanah there. Oshanasanas a kometz b'shtika, or he did the kometz b'shtika, that's a levana b'machshava. Did one of them, he did the kometz first without a machshava pigul. Rav Meir says pigul chayav koros. Now here he says very clearly you chayav love koros, right? Okay. Now Rish Lakish says das rishona. V'cham say no. Ein bo koros hashifaga b'chol mater. V'cham say what's the mater? Remember the kometz is the mater doing the kamitza. The kabbalah is the mater. The halacha is the mater. But when it comes to offering mizbeach, you need two things. You need both the kometz and the levona. And if you didn't have kavanah in both, the chum say ein mefaga b'chatzi mater. K'tani ain't a kometz. K'tani mia es a kometz b'shtika. If your first the kometz was b'shtika. So in other words, if you say kol asal das rishona osa, right, and there are two operations, the mincha, the kometz, and the levona, and he did the kometz, Rish Lakish can get away with saying that Rav Meir holds ein mefaga mechatzi mater like the chachamim. But if he had a machshava of kometz of pigul on the kometz and not on the levona, okay, so you say the levona followed the kometz. But he says over here, if you did the kometz, the first thing you did b'shtika, v'esa levona b'machshava, the second was machshava, and upliga, and Rav Meir argues there too. See, Rish Lakish could defend his argument if the first thing was a bad one. So he says, okay, the second one went based on the first one. But if the first one was a good one, what is he going to say? He says, Ema, so Rish Lakish will weasel out and say, Kvar nasanas levona machshava. He says the kometz was b'shtika, but he already did the levona first with the machshava. By the kometz levona, either one can be done first. So that kometz machshava first, right? Ema kfar nasanas levona machshava. So this doesn't make sense. Chada the hainu reisha. So that's the same thing. What's the difference when he said? But if you want elabalo factora, and he did the kometz with the machshava first, as the levona second one, or he did the kometz second and did the kometz quietly, but the levana was first. He already did. He said kvar nasan levana machshava. In other words, you're saying the same thing twice. You're saying if you did the first one with machshava, well, that's the kometz of levana, and the second one b'shtika. What are you repeating it for? What's the difference if the first one was with machshava, the kometz was with machshava first of pigul, and the second one levana was not, or the levana was first with the machshava of pigul? Either one, you're saying that you're saying the same thing twice. V'od hatanya va'achar kach. In another price within, read these words again from the Meisvah. So you see over here, if the kometz, so the first one was Rishtika, you can't say al das rishona. Rav Meir still holds its pigul. It's mashma pigul holds. Why? Because mafaga mechatzi mater. You say, okay, no, maybe it means when it says over here, you did the kometz b'shtika and the levona machshava, not the levona was second. The levona you already did first with the machshava. Maybe that's what it means. But in the Bryce it says v'achakach. Here it doesn't say v'achakach. In our Mishnah here, or the Bryce, it says nasan kometz machshava. That's the levona b'shtika. Ocean nasan kometz b'shtika. That's the levona machshava. And you want to weasel out and say, really, he holds ein mefagim mechatzi mater. But what happened over here was he did the kometz b'shtika, and he already had done the machshava. He already done the levona machshava. That's what you want to say. He already had done it. But in the Bryce it says v'achakach. In the Bryce it says, or he did the kometz b'shtika and v'achakach as levona machshava. So clearly, Rav Meir holds that what that mefagim mechatzi mater. So this seems to refute Rish Lakish entirely. right? Rashi says right before the Mishnah, "V'oda tiny b'braysa achrite oshnas of sakomets b'shtika ve'achar kach nosanas levon machshava." So clearly, the first machshava was not pigul. So how can you say, "Oh, it's pigul," because the second machshava followed the first one? The first machshava was okay. There was no machshava there. There was no bad machshava there. So it seems to be the Rav Meir really holds the mefaga mechatzimat, and that's the machlokes. Now tomorrow's Mishnah. There's a basic introduction here. The introduction to the Mishnah means like this: that what becomes pigul can only be something that something else was matir. That something else was matir. Meaning, you did shchita, so shchita, a kabbalah lachas rika. That's matir in the case of an olah, it's matir the whole animal to be burnt. In the case of a regular korban that's eaten, it's matir the emurim to be brought on the mizbeach, and then bring on the mizbeach. That's matir the food to be eaten. So it's only something which is becomes permitted through something else. In other words, what becomes pigul? The meat becomes pigul, let's say, because it was mutar, it was permitted via something else. But let's say it's not something that's permitted by something else. It itself is the thing. In other words, nothing else matter. It's matter itself. It's not matter alei something else, and it's not pigul. Look at the Mishnah. El she'en chayv mishum pigul. Ha-komets. Let's say you eat the komets. Let's say you had a machshav pigul, right? You did the fistful, and you put that on the mizbeach, right? Or you ate it. You did the komets, and then you ate that. That doesn't become pickle. Why? What is the komets matter? The rest of the flour. Oh. The rest of the flour. The komets is one fistful. Put that on the kli. Take the mizbeach, and you burn that. Then the rest of the flour is to be eaten. The rest of the flour can become pickle. The komets itself cannot. Or the octorus, which is totally burnt, not mat, it's not mutar something else, or the levona is matras beaten, or minchas kohana, minchas mashiach. These things are totally burnt. See these, so they don't become pigul idei something else. They become pigul through themselves, or they're matter something else, or nesachim, etc., etc. That's the basic idea over here. It goes on to explain kol sheyesh matirin, anything which something else makes permitted, whether it's permitted for a person or for the mizbeach. Then you're chayiv mishum pigul, right? So what about ola? Dama matzah b'sar l'zbeach. So the basar becomes pigul because it's mutar yidei dam. Bo'or l'kohanim. Ola sof dama matzah b'sar. In other words, when something else is matzah this item, that item becomes pigul. But if the thing that's matzah, the thing that makes it permissible, the permitting item, the thing that makes the other thing permitted, that's not pigul. You're not chayiv pigul there. One more thing at the end of the Mishnah. I'm just giving a preamble. Rav Shimon says at the end of the Mishnah that on karbanos that are brought in the inner mizbeach, there's no pigul at all. Because it's pigul's learned out from the pasuk. It talks about shlam. Shlam is an outer mizbeach carbon. So Rav Shimon disagrees. Now, we don't hold like Pashtas, we don't hold like Rav Shimon. But that's his sheet. He says there's b'chlal no pigul. We've been talking about today and yesterday about pigul and the second one of the Mishnah, right? That there's only pigul if you had a machshava on all the zrikas, whether it's 4 or 11 or 43 or 47 or 48 on all those rikas, because they didn't find mechatzi matzah. Well, Rav Shimon holds there is no pigul at all on an mizbeach. Now, tomorrow's daf is daf mem gimel, and Tuesdays is mem dalid. I won't be here tomorrow and Tuesday, but the Dapim will be on the podcast. And in fact, on tomorrow's daf, I recorded it properly now, so there's also a YouTube from mem gimel, because the last mem gimel that I had was from 22 years ago, and the quality was very poor. So I took the trouble to record it again now. And so they'll be on YouTube also. So Daf Mem Gimel and Mem Dalid will be Monday and Tuesday. I won't be here. On Wednesday, Meretz Hashem will start from the Mishnah on Mem Hey. There's a new Mishnah on Mem Hey. A few lines from the top of it. We'll pick it up from there on Wednesday. Shavua Tov to everybody. Rumi will be 6 hours separated until the end of the week.
Until the end of the week. Yeah,
you change the clocks next Saturday night. All right. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Regards to everybody.